Most people are familiar by now with the NPC meme, but to the uninitiated, NPC is a concept that originates from video games, and it stands for non-player character. NPCs are the characters within games which are really just background characters, or side characters if you will. They're the pedestrians in the GTA games. They man the taverns and shops in games like Fable and the Final Fantasy series, and they're the big daddies in Bioshock who guard and protect the little sisters. They're characters which often give the illusion of free will and autonomy, but really they're just simple, pre-programmed entities which operate on basic computer code and within narrowly defined limits within a game. An NPC might give you hints on quests, furnish you with supplies or information, or attack you with or without provocation. Many will simply walk aimlessly through the game's environment on a predetermined path, and are typically limited to only a handful of pre-programmed responses when interacted with. Essentially, their behaviours follow preset patterns and are therefore ultimately predictable. There's no human being behind these characters, as is the case for your own character that you control, and NPCs are basically just part of the game's architecture. They have no more free will or autonomy than the trees, rocks, or buildings within a game. In recent years, the label of NPC has been assigned to people in the real world who exhibit similar traits and behaviours to the NPCs in video games. NPCs are the people who seem devoid of free will, independent thought and critical thinking, and who seem capable only of thinking and speaking within the narrow confines of the programming they've received. Something of a hallmark of an NPC is that they lack the self-awareness to know that they're an NPC. They'll believe that what they're saying is original and that their opinions are their own. In reality, though, they act more like a sort of signal receiver repeater station, robotically parroting what they've heard, which is typically the establishment-approved narratives, talking points, and empty platitudes, all while exercising virtually no independent or critical thinking. Let's consider a quick example of the NPC in action. Let's say, hypothetically of course, that our governments and medical authorities were to tell us of a new infectious disease, the nature of this disease, its origins and cause, and how we can prevent and treat it. Let's also imagine in this scenario that the information we're given about the disease doesn't tally well with our reality, or with the scientific evidence. Perhaps it even contains glaringly obvious falsehoods and contradictions, or has even been disproven entirely. The NPC in this scenario will believe the information they're given anyway, and will follow the official recommendations on how to act, provided of course that that information comes from the right sources, i.e. the sources from which they receive their programming, i.e. the establishment, government bodies, approved media, educational institutions, etc. The NPC will then repeat the things they've been programmed to believe, be it from the World Health Organization, the CDC, or the BBC for example. The non-NPC, on the other hand, will likely, quite naturally, challenge the information on the basis of the contradictions and the inconsistencies they observe, and they'll make a decision on how to act as their own independent judgment dictates. The NPC, even when presented with information which would refute what they've been told by official sources, will cling to their beliefs. They might have a collection of phrases they've heard in the media or from the government, and they'll repeat these. Phrases like, trust the science, and that's a conspiracy theory. In other areas of political discourse, you might hear them say things like, Putin's the new Hitler, we're a nation of immigrants, borders are just imaginary lines, words are violence, and Trump is a fascist, etc., etc. They'll repeat these phrases mindlessly like mantras, and just like the NPCs in the video games, they have absolutely no clue what they're talking about, and it's like they're not even real people. The NPC meme is so apt to describe these people that it really isn't hard to see why it's become as popular as it has. For years, I've considered the question of why it is that some people are able to think for themselves while others appear unable to. Why is it that some people are curious and others aren't? Why do some people formulate their own opinions while others outsource this to some higher power? In other words, why is it that some people are NPCs? When we were children, we didn't yet have the intellectual and reasoning faculties sufficient to challenge what we were told, at least not easily. We were at the mercy of those who had responsibility for us. Truth wasn't something we determined alone, it was largely handed to us by our parents, our teachers, and the elders in our life. Together, these people did our thinking for us, where we were unable to, and it was from these people that we learnt about the world and learnt what to think. This is of course quite normal. Children rely largely on others for what to believe and how to act, because not only are they physically under-equipped to survive independently, but children are also intellectually underdeveloped. Children might believe in Father Christmas, the Easter Bunny, or the Tooth Fairy, even if the evidence of their own eyes would cast doubt on such beliefs. After all, the same people who told them about the existence of these figures are the same people who feed and clothe them. Children's minds are like sponges. They readily and indiscriminately absorb information. They take on the beliefs of those around them and on whose decision-making and action their survival depends. Children are dependents. This is what it means to be a child. However, children are not children forever. Children eventually become adults. Adults assume a new responsibility, which is primarily the use of their minds in order to live. I'll quote Ayn Rand here. "A man's mind is his basic tool of survival. Life is given to him, survival is not. His body is given to him, its sustenance is not. His mind is given to him, its content is not. To remain alive, he must act, and before he can act, he must know the nature and purpose of his action." Since as humans, our minds really are our primary means of survival, it's part of the normal trajectory of human maturation to develop our minds. Thought is not some luxury which we can do without, it's a foundationally essential ability for our species' survival. This makes us somewhat unique in the animal kingdom. It means we must be able to assess information that we receive, scrutinize it, and determine what is true and what is not. Critical thinking, the application of logic and reason to determine truth and decide upon appropriate action, are capacities we should develop as we become adults, and under normal circumstances would be essential to our survival. But not everyone makes it this far in their development. There's a significant proportion of the population who remain essentially children. Their bodies grow older, but the adult exterior belies something quite different underneath, a child's mind. And here you have your NPC. In such cases, people never really graduate from the phase of life in which all the thinking is done for them by someone else. Just as when they were children, they rely on those who they perceive to be their authority figures for their beliefs, for the information on which they should act in the world, and for their decision-making. They're incapable of thinking independently and of thinking critically, just as children are. It's essentially a form of arrested development, but since it's intellectual in nature and not physical, it can be difficult to identify at first. It's also interesting to note that the NPC meme is typically only applied to people on one side of the political divide. I think this is no coincidence. As discussed, children rely on some higher power for their survival, and for the NPC, this higher power is, of course, the state. NPCs would rather that the state take responsibility for their lives rather than assume it themselves. This explains those who are advocates of big government, who are in favour of state ownership of resources as well as redistributive models and big welfare programs. Basically people with strong socialist or communist leanings. Such people want the provision of virtually every service and resource socialised because this guarantees survival, irrespective of their level of self-responsibility, irrespective of their ability or willingness to think for themselves. The NPC feels safer knowing that someone else is interpreting and navigating this complex world for them and making their decisions. To challenge what they're told by the state would be to jeopardise this sense of security, just as a child can't bear to think that their parents could be wrong or could have made decisions that would bring them to harm. NPCs ultimately seek comfort and not truth. As the role of the state has grown, of course, so too has the responsibility it has assumed for people's lives, and so this becomes a sort of self-perpetuating loop. And of course, as state power grows, personal freedom is gradually undermined and eroded. We have created a society of children in adult bodies, and if civilizational collapse is coming our way, then the NPC has been more than just instrumental in this downfall. It has arguably been the foundation of it, since a society of thinking men and women could never give rise to the madness that we're currently witnessing. But we can't blame the NPC. NPCs don't know they're NPCs, and most will never know, and this is part of the challenge for the rest of us. If you're a thinking person, a player character if you will, someone with fully developed and functioning mental faculties and a capacity for critical thinking, then it's up to you to help steer the ship of our failing civilization. The NPCs aren't really our enemies, at least not consciously anyway. They're simply semi-conscious entities, soulless enforcers and passive vessels for state power. They're akin to the proles in 1984, or the citizens of Panam in the Hunger Games. They're the droids in Star Wars, the NS5s in iRobot, and the plugged-in civilians of the Matrix. They're victims, tools used by the powers that be to do their bidding and to implement and advance their agenda. So what can we do about NPCs? I think the best thing we can do is to keep making the argument despite the odds against us. the argument for reason, empiricism, evidence, and so on. In addition, we must do what we can to defend free speech, since free speech is what enables us to challenge ideas coherently and fosters a sort of environment of Darwinian selective pressure by where the best ideas can win over inferior ones. If you have NPCs in your life and they matter to you, try to be strategic when dealing with them. Consider what might be the easiest entry points to deprogram them. Identify the chinks in their armour of computer code and exploit them intelligently, but compassionately. Ask questions which might penetrate through their operating system, and just like the replicants in Blade Runner, they might start to slowly question things and develop an independent mind. For some NPCs, it takes pulling out just one loose thread before the whole fabric of lies and disinformation which engulfs their mind starts to slowly unravel, and then their programming can be gradually rewritten. It's like saving a hostage with Stockholm Syndrome, who will only thank you once the true nature of their captivity becomes apparent to them. You're Jack in Bioshock's Rapture, saving the little sisters from their Big Daddy protectors, and ultimately releasing them from their mental bondage. There are, however, some for whom, sadly, the computer code is so robust and the programming so deeply embedded into their operating system that there really may be no hope of saving them at all, and being an NPC is their final destiny. So only expend energy where and on whom you feel worth it. I'll end with a quote from Morpheus. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.